This is the story of a girl who cried a river and drowned.
Well, it's just a phase you're going through.
It's a phase.
It's just a phase you're going through. Phase you're going through. Phase you're going through. Phase you're going through. Phase you're going through.
It's a phase. Where does that come from? This topic was brought to my attention mostly because I feel like this is something that every adult says to the LGBT community. If I had a dime for every time I've heard that sentence, goodness gracious, I would have a pool full of dimes that I could swim in just because I've heard that sentence so many times. Oh, sorry. My mom gave me these poppers and I love playing with these things. Like when I was a kid, I would put it in my mouth and try to pop like 8,000 of them at once with my teeth. I have weird hobbies. Anyway, so here's my reasoning as to why a lot of people think that it's a phase when it comes to homosexuality. The big reason that a lot of adults somehow link the you're going through a phase to your homosexuality is because for some reason they think it's a phase or an experiment. A lot of the time, well, I really and truly, I blame, and this sounds really bad, and there's nothing wrong with experimenting because a lot of people do it, but for some reason, adults, they think because of that small majority of people who experiment in college and high school, they're under the influence of alcohol and drugs, those people who experiment with the same sex, they automatically think that that group of people, and this is the group of people that kill it, they kill it for the LGBT community because they link that group, the specific group, to our group. They think that because those people out there who like to experiment and have fun with alcohol, and a lot of the time they get carried away and, they'll kiss the same sex, they'll have sex, they'll have, forgive me, they'll have sex with the same sex. A lot of the time, adults link that, the experimenting, to the it's a phase. So, like they'll be like, oh yeah, it's a phase, I went through that in high school too. I got drunk and I hooked up with the same sex, or I was just curious and I experimented with the same sex. A lot of people, they incorporate that, the experimenting, to the it's a phase. And that's how that sentence became what it is. It's because of that sentence that it's very hard for the LGBT community to be taken seriously. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with experimenting. I'm just going to say it flat out. There's nothing wrong with that. I think everybody does it, especially when you're trying to come into your own. When you're trying to become the adult that you eventually become, you do. Because you're not too sure what you want. And, around the years of like 14, or even before that, like I would say 12 to 25 even, I think people still do that. People are still curious and they're not sure what they want, and a lot of it just comes from confusion and all the options that there are out there. But don't put those people in the same category as homosexuals, because it's not the same category. We can't help how we feel. That would be like me going up to a straight person and saying, well, you must be going through a phase. Why do you like the opposite sex? How could you ever like the opposite sex? There's no way. You must be going through some kind of phase. You'll eventually get over it. This is some kind of experiment. Don't worry about it. That would be like me saying that to a straight person. That's how it feels for us. It hurts. It doesn't feel good. It makes us feel like our feelings don't matter. Like our feelings don't make any sense, and our feelings shouldn't be accounted for. They should be. Because we can't help how we feel, and I put that in videos before. So that's the way I see it. I always take a situation and I reverse it. I think of the reverse effect. how would it feel for the opposite end? So think about it. But a lot of the time, I take a lot of consideration into the general population of people who tell us we're going through a phase. If you think about it, most of the people who say you're going through a phase are from the ages, or usually in between the ages of, like, I would say 40 and on. You have to take into consideration the way they grew up. It hurts, but you have to think about it. Think about the way they were raised. Think about their parents. So think about basically your parents' parents, your grandparents. Your grandparents raised your parents to almost not even accept mixed race couples. Like, they were brought up to believe that, you're a man, you go get a job, the woman stays home and cooks and cleans and takes care of the house while the man goes out and works. Think about how different that is now. Usually the woman works now a lot more than the man. I've actually seen a lot more men who stay home now and women who work. Or both of them work equally. Or the doesn't have a job and the girl does, or the girl doesn't have a job and a man does. But generally, it's mixed. So it usually goes hand in hand. So our generation as a whole has changed. So my kids are going to have a very different outlook on how society runs compared to even my outlook on society. I think so. I don't think it's going to stay the same. I think it's still going to keep changing, and there's going to be a lot more evolution to society. I think so. But a lot of the time, I take into consideration my parents' parents, and that the way they were brought up. They were set on a set of values as children to believe a certain thing, and they were said to believe that until they became independent-minded, right? Just like we are. The way you're brought up, and then when you're old enough to have your own opinions and your own thoughts, it changes. But think about the way they were brought up until now. They were brought up with a certain set of outlooks, a certain set of ideas. And because of those, that happening, they believe what they believe. And a lot of the time, they're not going to change their minds. They're not going to change their beliefs. They're set with that. They're ingrained with that. Their minds are just ingrained with it. So there's only so much you can do. Now on to the advice. Take it with a grain of salt. I tell this to people all the time because it does hurt. It hurts to hear that, oh, well, apparently what I'm going through doesn't matter, or it's a phase, or it's an experiment, and I don't know what I want yet, and eventually I'll go back to the other. You're going to hear that for a long time. You just are. Like I said, consider the way your parents were raised. Consider your parents' views on society and couples and religion. Consider that. They're going to keep telling you that until one day they really and truly see how you feel, and that this is your lifestyle, and these are your beliefs and outlooks and the way you want to live your life. One day your parents, they will see that. They will see that this is the way you want to live your life. This is what you truly believe, and that you're sticking to it. So my best advice is to stick to your beliefs. Stick to the way that you feel, the way you feel. If you're a guy and you're in love with guys, stick to it. Don't go back on your parents' account. Don't go back on anyone else's account who tells you different. If this is what you believe and this is how you feel, don't change your opinion for someone else. Don't change your values that you believe strongly for someone else. Psychologically, when someone tells us so many times that it's an experiment, that this is a phase, a lot of the time we believe it. Because we think, well, maybe because so many people are telling us this, so many people are telling me that I'm going through a phase and that this is an experiment, that eventually you kind of believe it. It's not. People are just telling you that because that's their opinion. That's what they believe because they don't know, because they're not going through it. We don't know how straight people feel. So straight people don't know how we feel. So they don't know how we're feeling about a situation. So they're guessing based off of statistics. And that goes back to the girls and guys in college who experiment while they're intoxicated. That's what they're going off of. They're going off of the people who experiment in high school and college. That's it. And maybe a couple of friends they've seen who've, like I said, maybe they got sick of it, you know. I see this every once in a while. Like, I'll see a girl who's like, oh, I'm sick of guys. I'm gonna go date girls for a little while. Unfortunately, that goes into the whole experimenting section. Yeah, unfortunately. But that's a rare thing too. That happens more now because apparently guys just have this really bad reputation now. And I think it's because men aren't technically really men anymore, if you think about it. Because girls are so independent and girls can do so many things by themselves, so they don't rely on a man anymore. So a man in general, the idea of a man has lost its, I would say, revenue. It's lost its value because we're living in a very different society. So you'll see that more and more, that girls and even guys are going to be like, well, maybe I'll just go to the other team. But that I'm trying to think of the word I'm looking for. That idea of people, that section of people, they are not labeled into the same category as homosexuals. Those are people, like I said, who are experimenting, and that's the statistics that people who accuse you of being in a phase usually look at. They usually look toward those people, or the people who experiment in college. So that's not your fault. My best advice is to not look into that. To just, like I said, take it with a grain of salt. Remember that your feelings are your feelings, and no one can change them but you. Remember? They're yours. Our feelings are the one thing that we truly have. They're the one thing that you own, that no one can take away from you. So my friends, don't give up. I know it's hard because we hear it so much. And we're going to hear it a lot for the rest of our lives. You're going to hear it pretty much every day, that you're going through a phase and that this is an experiment. But just remember that you're strong and that you have to understand where their knowledge comes from. Think about it. Do they really know this stuff? Do they really know how we feel unless they've felt it themselves? Think about it. Alright guys, this has been Alexa, and I really hope you all having a great day, and this is my room. I don't know if y'all ever seen it before. Alright, I'm gonna go. I gotta play with my poppers. Peace.